Okay, perfect. Let's begin. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us for today's installment of the 2021 REMI Model Training Series. My name is Dee Scott, the Marketing Administrator here at REMI, and I have the pleasure of serving as your webinar host this afternoon. Our speaker today will be REMI analyst May Lin. May supports several clients across the globe with their economic modeling needs. She works to ensure every REMI model user can incorporate our model into their organization as effectively as possible. She has experience in economic modeling, data analysis, and programming. Ms. Lin holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Purdue University and a master's degree in statistics from Washington University in St. Louis. Following discussion, there will be an opportunity to have your questions answered. Please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A submission portal at any time during today's discussion to be answered later in the presentation by Ms. Lin. For your convenience, all registrants for this webinar will receive direct access to the webinar slides and recording via follow-up email. So please keep an eye out for it later this afternoon in your inbox, as it will go to the same email address used to register for today's event. Without further ado, I will hand it off to May to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Dave, for the great introduction. Before we go into the model and module go through, let's go over the topics at first. I will give an overview of REMI in general first, and then we will talk about E3+, the model, and give a live model demonstration. And after the E3+ introduction, we will also go through a new developed module called SSDI. I will introduce its capabilities, and there will be also a module demonstration. And lastly, we will have the Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your question in the questions section. So first, about REMI. REMI has 40 years of history in academic research and software development, and has led to the development of the state-of-the-art model in macroeconomic research methodology. The general REMI approach has 4 key components. The input-output component, it captures industry structure and also inter-industry transactions. Production of a firm increases production along the supply chain. For example, in aerospace manufacturing, businesses need parts and also labor to produce. General equilibrium. The models will adjust to new economic activities by doing the expansion until reach equilibrium. So if a region grows, migrants will enter the region until housing prices increase, and also the compensation rate and employment opportunities level off. The model has details to present specific changes, for example, effects of workforce, training for nurses. And third, econometrics. REMI parameters and results are determined using econometric and also statistical methodology. Fourth, economic geography. REMI analysis impacts among regions. So if a policy change in Washington State happens, it may have a larger impact on, like, let's say, Oregon State than that on Mississippi State. All these 4 components make up the integrated REMI economic modeling approach. When building a model, the first thing REMI does is to define the model regions. REMI can break regions down to county level or equivalent statistical unit. And of course, we can do a collection of counties like a MSA or a state, or even across state borders. For example, Kansas City actually has 2 parts from 2 different states, so we can build that model as well. Within a model, there can be multiple regions. These can all be customized by needs. Before introducing how a REMI model works, let's first review the concepts of static models versus dynamic models. As we know, static models are at equilibrium of the steady state, whereas dynamic models keep changing in reference to time. Dynamic models represent the behavior of the static components of the system. In real economy, there are a lot of dynamics, and that's why we really need dynamic model for forecasts and simulations. This chart shows how REMI dynamic model work. First, we take a default regional or national baseline forecast and use it as the control forecast. These baselines are annually updated using mainly using data sources include BLS and BA data. And then we qualify and input a policy change X, run the simulation, and get an alternative forecast. So finally, we put those two forecasts together and we are able to compare the differences. REMI can forecast economy going out to 2060, which enables us to do not only short-term but also long-term analysis. After the general intro for REMI, we will then talk about the model E3+. The name E3+ stands for Economy, Energy, and Environment. So the model E3+ allows users to analyze the macroeconomic and demographic impact of any initiatives related to the energy and environmental sectors. To go through the 5 blocks on the left, please follow me with an example of a general economic growth in a region. Let's say when demand for a product or a service increases, companies will increase their output to meet the increased demand. Companies do this by investing more and hiring more workers. So more workers start the cycle over again, with there being even more money spent in the economy, increasing demand further. If we look at the first block, it has output and demand. Here we have output equals to consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net trade, where net trade equals exports minus imports. Block 2 is labor and capital demand, and block 3 is for population and labor supply. This block enables us to tell if people move into or move out from a region, and if they enter or leave the labor force. Block 4 is for compensation, prices, and costs. It shows living standards, answers questions like, are people getting compensated better, or can a resident afford a place to live? Block 5 is the market share. It has exports, imports, and self-supply, which means if a region can meet the needs of its own demand. Now let's get started on the live demo where we can know E3+ better. To do that, we will use a Washington State single region model, and we will do an impact study where we will start a new aerospace manufacturing business in Washington State with an increase of 1,000 jobs. For the industry, we will choose aerospace product and parts manufacturing in the model. Here we're looking at the home screen of E3+ model. What we use most commonly is the biggest tile on the top left corner called New Regional Simulation. This means we will be building a new simulation based on the REMI baseline forecast. In the search box, we're able to search the policy variable that we're interested in. In this case, we want to run a simulation of new employment. We select the policy variable, choose exogenous production. This means this is a brand new business in this region. It's not crowding out, it's not replacing any current businesses. For industry, under manufacturing, and under other transportation equipment manufacturing, we're most interested in the aerospace production and parts manufacturing because it's Washington State and we have the Boeing headquarters in Seattle. For units, we will use units. Here we're selecting the years from 2022 all the way out to 2060. We input 1,000 to all the years. We're doing this because these numbers indicates the difference between the baseline and the simulation. So this doesn't mean that we're adding 1,000 people to Washington State every year. Instead, this means we will put 1,000 jobs in the year of 2022, and we keep those 1,000 jobs. They're not leaving. And then we will add the policy variable into the simulation and then run the forecast. Here we have the results shown in the final section. Again, let's first look at the 5-block model linkages. Here's where we started. We input some numbers for employment, which means in Washington State, following these arrows, there's going to be more employment opportunity. People are easier to find a job. But on the other hand, that means for a company, it's a little bit harder to hire an ideal candidate. So the compensation rate will be increasing a little bit as well. Moving further, we can see that the employment opportunity will increase the participation rate because the job market is more attractive and people will be moving from other states into Washington, causing an increase in migration as well. Since there are more people in the state, the government spending will go up as well. Also, people will make more consumption in this region. Having these two indicators, government spending and consumptions, the output of Washington State will go up as well. And output will further increase the employment of this region. So this is only one of the stories that can be told using this one example. As we can see, all the indicators, all the main key results are related to each other. Using the analytical graphs, Here we can see 3 indicators shown on the line chart. They are consumption, investment, and government spending. First, as we discussed, the consumption in Washington State will go up, and then investment will go up for demand for building, equipment, housing, and residential capital stock as well. And both indicators, consumption and investment, the increases in these two will further cause an increase in government spending. The government will spend more because there are more residents in this state. We can also see it in another chart, including population, GDP, and government spending. Again, the population will start increase pretty rapidly in the first several years, and then it will gradually slow down. This is because the economy will finally reach equilibrium, so the growth will slow down a little bit. And we can see the GDP increase as well. Both indicators will again cause an increase in government spending. In the second sector, labor and capital demand, we're able to see that total employment components for private non-farm increasing a lot, and also the government employment. In the population and labor supply sector, here we're looking at 2 lines. The blue line represents the population, which is a cumulative indicator, a cumulative result, which means the differences from the baseline to the simulation is always positive, but we can see that the growth is slowing down. And the red line represents the net economic migrants, which means the people that are attracted by the new job opportunities from other states into Washington State. As we can notice that in the first year, 2022, the increase in both population and migrants are the same. This is because we directly input 1,000 jobs into this area. And then since net economic migrants is not a cumulative indicator, it shows the differences, or it shows the people that are moving into Washington State every year. So still we have people moving into the state every year, but again, it's slowing down, and it reached basically 0 in the long term. And then another very interesting indicator is the compensation rate. We just talked about how compensation rate will be impacted. Since there are more job opportunities, of course, a company will need to pay more to hire an ideal employee. So looking at the percentage change again, we can see that the labor force increased a lot. Labor force indicates that the people are either working or looking for a job. Since we directly add 1,000 employment, the labor force will increase along with it. The blue line represents the average annual compensation rate, which increases a lot in the first year and then keep increasing in the following years. The yellow line on the top is the residence adjusted employment. This indicator means the people that are both working in Washington State and living in Washington State. Another very interesting table we usually look at is the employment by industry. Here, instead of percentage change, we are looking at differences, which means the actual number in increase of the jobs for each industry. If we sort the increase of year 2022, we'll see that, of course, the top industry that has the most job increase will be the aerospace product and parts manufacturing. And then it's followed by construction. This is because since people are moving into the area for new jobs, maybe there are new factories built or new housing apartment built for people to live in. The third private industry is retail trade. This is because retail trade industry is very labor intensive, so it does not require a lot of training or education to be employed by the industry of retail trade. So we will usually see an increase no matter what employment we put in. Thank you for going through the E3 Plus model. Besides E3 Plus, we will also look at the SDI module capacities. And first, we will talk about what is SDI and why should we use SDI. REMI SSI is the premium modeling solution for evaluating the socio-economic indicators of projects, programs, and also policy changes, and public policy should serve the interests of the public. In order to ensure that policy effects are broad-based, we need to evaluate how different social and demographic groups are affected by the policies. Also, it's required to do so by federal, state, and local regulations. American demography is changing. Therefore, building a diverse workforce is imperative for future economic development and growth. REMI SDI module has these 9 main indicators which can measure the disparities. They are compensation distribution, employment changes by earning quintile, consumption price by earning quintile and range, inequality coefficient, employment by race and gender, employment by education attainment, labor force participation by race and gender, unemployment, and also per capita income. In the module demonstration, I will mainly focus on 3 indicators: compensation distribution along with its inequality coefficient, and finally the employment by race and gender. We're still using the same case study. So all we need to do is go to the socio-economic indicators, click on compensation distribution, and look at the weighted compensation rate. As we know, aerospace manufacturing may require higher education or training or more training. So it can be expected that the income group having the highest 20% of compensation rate gain the most benefits. Although the compensation rate is increasing for other groups, we can still see that the people that are already earning the most is getting the most benefits, and that is expected. So as a result, if we look at the inequality coefficient, we see an increase, not too much, but still an increase in the years we input the numbers. This means the inequality has been increased. Following by that, we can also look at employment by demographics, which include employment by race, employment by gender, or employment by race and gender. I would like to change the comparison type into percentage change because the base of demographic groups are different. Looking at percentage change should give us a better insight of how different groups are under impact. We can see that actually the policy is increasing employment for all the racial groups. With that being said, we still see that the increase in white non-Hispanic group is having a slightly higher increase. If we look at employment by gender, also percentage change, again, we see both increase in male and female employment, but obviously within the increased employment, there are more jobs for male than that for female. After going through all the key results in REMI model and SCI, let's take a look at the E3+ unique results, which make it different from all the other REMI models. The first sector under E3+ is carbon dioxide emissions. This indicates the energy-related carbon dioxide emissions by sector and also by source, based on annual energy outlook. Details include residential, commercial, and industrial uses of these energies. The fuel type includes petroleum, natural gas, coal, and electricity. Show the legend here and take out total. The top line here indicates industrial used energy, which has the most increase in volume. Another indicator that is closely related to this one is called energy consumption. This is pretty straightforward since businesses is more active in Washington State. there's more energy consumed, and therefore the carbon dioxide emissions goes up as well. That is to say, we can expect a pretty similar line chart. So as expected, it's still industrial used energy. But if we want to look at which category or which type of energy increases the most, we can use percentage change as the comparison type. Sort by the year of 2022. We will know that actually the industrial electricity has been consumed the most, because the aerospace manufacturing requires a lot of electrical work, and the engine manufacturing, the parts, and the labor force also requires a lot of consumption in electricity. Finally, is the social cost of carbon. In REMI models in E3+, they are preset parameters for each type of fuel or each field of use for all the fuel types. So once we know how much consumption the input has increased in each energy type, we can the model will use those parameters to estimate the increase in social cost of carbon dioxide emissions in the future. This is usually a very important indicator to evaluate the impact not only in economy but also in society.